All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. Whoa. As you can see, my name's like kind of blocked out there in the bottom left, or Fatma's name. But welcome to Weekly Current Events and our 2020 election update with Fatma and I. So, first of all, y'all should definitely go check out our social media, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. They're phenomenal. We post some reminders on content and whenever streams are coming up and new like blog posts and stuff that should be helpful for your AP courses. So definitely go check those out. In terms of our upcoming weekly calendar, we have a lot going on. In fact, I just came here an hour and a half ago from my synthesis overview stream. If you're in AP English language, come check us out. Mondays at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. We had stats that happened just 30 minutes ago. We have some geography, psych, and gov happening tomorrow. We have sciences on Wednesdays and histories on Thursdays. Also, because this is like an AP GoPo, AP Lang collaboration kind of deal, you should definitely check out our specific two stream teams. For instance, GoPo streams on Tuesdays, so tomorrow, and AP Lang streams an hour and a half before this current events stream. And so next week we'll be covering the synthesis introduction paragraph. And tomorrow, GoPo is actually going to be talking about must-know Supreme Court cases.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in terms of this stream, you'll spend like the first 15 to 20 minutes with me, your lovely friend, Brandon, over domestic and international current events. I'll also bring in a little bit of AP Lang and AP Gov Connections, and then I'll hand it off to Fatma to do a quick 2020 election update. So our first current event is the bipartisan vote against President Trump. So back a few months ago, President Trump authorized an airstrike against Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani. And the administration said that he was like planning imminent attacks on embassies, which was later proved to not necessarily be true, as President Trump's defense secretary, Mark Esper, said on Fox News that there was no such intelligence. But either way, Qasem Soleimani is dead. And then the House and the Senate were like, hey, that's not your right to assassinate him. That's our right to declare war. So the House passed a non-binding resolution, which has like no effect, but the Senate passed a new war powers resolution that basically mandates that President Trump has to pull any US troops from military hostilities against Iran within 30 days unless he gets a green light from Congress. Already, the Trump administration is saying they're going to veto this resolution. And so this highlights two things that are super important in AP US government and politics. The first is that the power of declaring war is enumerated and given to Congress, not to the president. And second, it also kind of shows that President Trump is the commander-in-chief. But I guess third, it shows the separation of powers and checks and balances, because President Trump has the ability to veto Congress. And Congress, if they were to get 66 or 67 votes, I think, then they'd be able to override that veto. It's not happening because there's only about 8 Republican senators instead of like the 13, I'm undercounting, instead of the 19 needed to override President Trump's veto. So yeah, it shows how, the checks and balances system that seems kind of superficial and not realistic happens literally every single day. Like we have vetoes going on, we have separation of powers happening with like different execution of powers. So yeah, it's pretty cool. In terms of the next current event, we have Roger Stone, who's pictured in the top and the bottom picture. He's President Trump's former advisor, and he was actually sentenced to more than 3 years, 40 months in prison for lying to Congress, obstruction, and witness tampering. It was actually recommended at first that he would get 9 years in prison, but then President Trump said that it was really unfair and horrible on Twitter, and then the Justice Department suggested a more lenient sentence. And that was interesting because then we saw that all 4 of the prosecutors who were prosecuting Roger Stone, President Trump's advisor, quit the case after the Justice Department made this new lenient sentence. And then that led to like outcry over what seemed like political pressure by the White House. And even Roger Stone himself, after this guilty verdict, has requested a new trial, saying that a juror, I think it was the jury forewoman, was biased, which is very interesting. So yeah, it sort of highlights how President Trump's cabinet, a lot of it is either resigned or in jail. And even though his whole argument was like, we're going to drain the swamp, seems like a lot of his swamp is in jail or resigned. Anyways, in terms of international current events, we have the Uyghur Muslims in China. By the way, if you have any questions about any of the current events that I'm talking about today, we have 2 planned for domestic and 1 for international, although I'm going to like touch on another international event. Feel free to leave a comment or ask a question in the Ask a Question tab. You can also ask us questions about AP GoPo or AP Lang. We were both like pretty successful students in both subjects, or for me, 1 subject. So you can definitely let us know if you have any questions, because yeah, this is current events centered, but we're here to help you all out. And yeah, especially with Fiveable's new like free content, which you should definitely check out, including our blog posts, our study guides, and all of our free streams and replays. We want to be a resource for y'all, and that's what like is Fiveable's advantage over like prep books and other resources. So be sure to ask us questions, because that's what we're here for. Anyways, let's talk about the Uyghur Muslims. So hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs and other Muslim minority groups have been placed into camps, which is really problematic because many are comparing it to like the Holocaust and other times like Japanese internment camps in the United States. In fact, we saw that the Chinese Communist Party accidentally got one of their files leaked, which kind of detailed how Uyghur Muslims were tracked and how certain ones were arrested. So basically, they tracked them through religion. They kept note of criteria such as praying, whether they're going to mosques, if they're growing a long beard. And the Chinese government has set up a lot of surveillance in Xinjiang province in northwest China, where the Uyghur Muslims live. So that's how they're able to track them. Also, the party has been focusing on like family ties. So when they like look at detained relatives who are ending up in a camp, they're looking at the attitude, behavior, and whether they're like still with like the Muslim ideology or with like the Chinese Communist Party. So like if your family relatives aren't really performing that well in that internment camp, you could be facing liability and potential arrest or detainment. So yeah, it's like a pretty problematic issue that many countries are unwilling to talk about, simply because China is like a huge trade powerhouse, and like losing a relationship with the People's Republic of China will be really bad for almost any economy. The other issue I was going to talk about that isn't in this presentation is Brexit. So, you know, Britain voted to exit the European Union in 2016. It's 2020, and they finally left on January 31st. So now we've already seen like a lot of people complaining about long lines in immigration and people regretting their Brexit votes, but it's official. Britain is no longer part of the European Union, and there's now negotiations going on to determine whether or not they're going to have like a similar level of trade, if they're going to renegotiate trade agreements. And that actually brings us to AP English language and our tie-in for today. So I think a whole issue that's been going on is like isolationism, especially within like the Trump administration and in Britain as a whole. And it sort of highlights, that's like an example in which we're seeing people grow farther apart rather than grow together. Could be a potential topic, like AP Lang sometimes uses argument essays on a variety of issues, like eminent domain a few years ago. They talked about like the value of politics in our media and stuff. So that might be something that comes up. Anyways, I'll hand it over to Fatma, who's going to talk about Nevada, and Bernie Sanders.
Okay, yeah, pretty sure our argument or synthesis essay last year was about like windmills. So that's fun. Okay, but on that note, which had absolutely nothing to do with Nevada, Senator Bernie Sanders won the Democratic primary there. So he honestly quite literally won by a landslide, because Senator Sanders got 46% of the overall Democratic vote there. And so the runner-up, who is Vice President Joe Biden, got 20% of the vote. So just like breaking that down by the numbers, the first place winner got like almost half, and the second place winner got a fifth of the total vote. So that's like a pretty huge margin to win by. And so one of the reasons why that's really important is because Nevada is a very diverse state. It's not like New Hampshire or Iowa, which like come first in the Democratic primary, that are like majority like white states, they actually have very large like Hispanic, or Nevada has a very large Hispanic population, and it's pretty diverse among other ethnicities too. And so one of the reasons why that's important to Senator Sanders is because in 2016 he struggled to build a coalition with like people of color. And so now, like this year in 2020, 53% of Hispanic voters that voted in the Democratic primary cast their votes for Senator Sanders. And like 27% of African American voters that voted in the Democratic primary also voted to support Senator Sanders. So a pretty big change that happened specifically because Senator Sanders' campaign focused a lot on making sure that he would be able to build these relationships with like a diverse coalition of voters, because like that's part of his like whole campaign's argument that they're going to build a multi-generational, multiracial coalition to beat Donald Trump in November. And so Nevada's also way more representative of the Democratic electorate and like the United States in general, because it's not made up of like mostly white voters. And so this is really important because it gives Bernie Sanders a huge boost when like leading into Super Tuesday, which is when a bunch of states across the country have their primaries, like shout out to Texas, where me and Brandon are, and the South Carolina debate, which is going to be happening tomorrow. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. And so on that note, speaking of the 2020 election, obviously Russia is once again like trying to interfere in the 2020 election. So the U.S. intelligence recently like made this assessment that Russia is going to like try to interfere in the 2020 election and like once again like reignite their like disinformation campaigns and meddle in those ways. And so there isn't specific evidence that links like Russia's interference in the 2020 election cycle and like it wanting to reelect Trump. Right now, like the intelligence community is saying it's more about creating discord within America. So like kind of dividing people and creating more partisan division. And like Russia views President Trump as a leader that they can work with more easily as compared to like any Democrat that's elected, right? Because like even right now, like presidential candidates are like kind of slamming Russia for like trying to interfere within the US elections. And so the reason why that's really, or like that came to light is because some national security officials recently testified in Congress. And so one of them, whose name is Shelby Pearson, kind of overstated how much Russia was going to be interfering and like favoring President Trump, and like made that direct link when the intelligence community has tried to like avoid saying that because there's like no explicit evidence that that's what they're going to try to be doing in the 2020 election cycle. And so that is actually the reason why the current national security advisor, whose name is Robert O'Brien, on like the Sunday talk shows and said that there was absolutely no intelligence that said that there was any Russian interference aimed at helping Trump. And so if you think about it, that's like kind of problematic, right? Because like the top national security advisor in the White House is denying that Russia is going to like try to interfere to help the president. And so it's not even about like partisanship at that point. It's more about like election security and like protecting democracy no matter which party you're in. So that's what's happening there. And so because of that, and because of Russia trying to interfere in the election, Democrats want to have sanctions or sanction Russia in order to like discourage any interference from happening. So today, on Monday, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Foreign Relations Ranking Member Bob Menendez, and Banking Committee Ranking Member Senator Sherrod Brown, they sent a letter to the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and to the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, who sort of like oversee sanction policy, in order to like ask for in this letter to discourage Russian interference in the 2020 election. So they're pretty much arguing that sanctions would be an effective way in order to like convey to Russia that the United States won't tolerate any interference within their electoral process, right? And so they specifically wanted measures to identify and target sanctions for any like people that are determined to be responsible for ongoing election interference. And they said that even if that included President Putin, they would want to like also sanction him. And so, by the way, President Vladimir Putin is like the president of Russia. Fun fact, in case you didn't know that. So they're pretty much aiming to protect electoral security, right? Because they're saying that, hey, if there's this country, Russia, that's trying to interfere in our elections, one way to make them stop is to sanction them. And so, like, sanctions, like specifically economic sanctions, are like one way to tell a country that they like kind of need to back off if they're doing something that your country doesn't agree with. And so Democrats are also trying to like pass bills in order to, or it's not just Democrats, because there's also been a couple of bipartisan electoral security bills that they've like tried to get passed in the Senate. But unfortunately, Senate Mark Warner of Virginia and Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, they tried passing a current election security bills. One would have required campaigns to report any offers that they got from foreign countries to the FBI, and another that would have required campaigns to report any offers like that to the Federal Elections Commission, aka the FEC. But those haven't actually been able to pass because in most of these cases, the GOP has tried to like block these measures from actually being enacted, right? And so Senator Martha Blackburn of Tennessee argued that it's a states' rights issue. So she said that they're attempting to bypass like the Rules Committee and like pass these bills that will take control of elections from the states and take it from the states and put it in the hands of Washington, D.C. bureaucrats. And so she's saying that like in the Constitution and the way that like the United States has decided to delegate the powers of elections, states are completely in charge of running their own elections, right? So the federal government has in the past like passed funding to help states get like updated security measures for elections, but it's still like up to states whether or not they're going to like, first of all, accept that money, but second of all, like implement any changes that the government suggests. So Senator Martha Blackburn is saying that these like bills are taking that autonomy away from the states. And so that's the argument that she's making in denying these bills passage, but it's kind of debatable, like if you want to see both sides, like whether or not we have to prioritize election security or whether or not we should like prioritize being able to continue running these elections, which technically they would still be able to do, but that's what Senator Martha Blackburn feels is the case. So in recent streams, we've sort of like started touching on a different Senate race every week. And so we've talked about, totally blanking here. We talked about Arizona last week. Okay, and so this week we're going to be talking about Colorado. And so there's this thing called Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball. And so it's this nonpartisan project that the University of Virginia Center for Politics does. And they kind of just rate elections and they decide whether or not they're going to be like leaning Republican or leaning Democratic. And so it's kind of considered like on the national stage a very like good way to predict elections. So very recently, the Colorado U.S. Senate race was moved from being a toss-up, so they didn't know whether or not it was going to be a Republican who won or a Democrat who won, to leaning Democratic. And so they said that the reasons for this change was that Colorado voters seem to be preferring Democrats, and they seem to be like following this trend over the past few years. And that because the incumbent U.S. Senator Cory Gardner had been supporting President Trump more generally, that was sort of a signal that he was in a more like weak spot, right? And so like on that exact same like train of thought, Senator Gardner also has been like campaigning with President Trump in Colorado. So he's like sort of allying himself way closer with the president. And so in 2018, and one of the reasons why the crystal ball's rating changed, Democrats were able to control of the state legislature and the governor's mansion. So they've like had some pretty big gains in state, especially considering that like something like that hadn't happened for Democrats since 2013, right? And so right now, the front runner for like becoming the Democratic nominee in the Colorado Senate race is former governor of Colorado, John Hickenlooper. And so you guys might remember him because for a very brief period of time, he did try to run for the US Democratic presidential nomination, and he dropped out because he was not doing so great in the polls or anywhere. And so he entered the race in August after dropping out of the like US presidential nomination race, and he was endorsed by the Senate Democrats campaign arm. So it kind of means that he's like the establishment candidate. It's who Senate Democrats see as being the most likely to be able to like beat Senator Gardner in November. And so he is leading in fundraising out of all of the Democrats in the field. And so we'll see what happens in November and whether or not he actually wins his primary. But on that note, if you guys want to tune in to any of Fiveable's other streams, here's the calendar for the entire week. We'll be streaming Monday through Thursday. And keep in mind, like Brandon said earlier, that from now on, all of Fiveable's replays and live streams are going to be free. So if you miss a current event stream, don't even worry about it because you can always watch the replay. And the same goes for any other subject, like Gov or Lang or Stats or any other class that you're taking. This is everything that's going to be happening this week. And yeah, tomorrow there's going to be a review of Supreme Court cases, and Lang next Monday is going to be doing a synthesis intro paragraph. And we'll be back every Monday at 8:30 at Eastern Time. And so, yeah, make sure you follow Fiveable across all their social media. If you have any questions, now would be a great time to ask them. But if not, me and Brandon are signing off. Thanks so much for tuning in, y'all.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, y'all.